Good morning. My name is Jill Lalonde, and I'm president of the Minnesota International NGO Network, commonly referred to as MINN. I'm also a practitioner with Land O'Lakes International Development. I welcome you to our second annual International Development Exchange and Action Summit. For me, just having us all together in this room is truly energizing. We are the hosts, but the real value comes from all of you out there. Can I see a show of hands of who's a first-time attendee at a MINN event? Okay, leave them up for just a moment. We wanna notice you. We give all of you a special welcome, and we look forward to getting to know you better. This day has been in planning for most of the past year. The Idea Summit is organized entirely by volunteers who have worked many days, evenings, and weekends to ensure this experience is fulfilling for all of us. We sincerely thank them. Many volunteers are here today, identified by ribbons on their name badges. Please reach out to them if you have any special needs or questions. Like the summit, MINN is a volunteer-run organization. I'm constantly amazed at the quality programming that is produced on a regular basis. If you have not visited MINN's website, please do, as it's full of information about the many ways to get involved. We've made it very easy for you to connect today. In fact, we invite you to connect with the outside world and with each other throughout the day on social media. On Twitter, you can use hashtag MinnSummit, and our Twitter handle is @MinnesotaNGOs. Feel free to tweet your questions for the panel discussion later. We'll be taking questions that way as well as from note cards. In addition to quality volunteers, the stability of our organization depends upon our paying members. All of you know how necessary ongoing funding is to create quality programming. Our members are a key source for financial support. Today, you'll recognize official members by their I Am a MINN Member button. These are the individuals especially committed to keeping MINN robust. If you are not a member of MINN, I encourage you to support us by joining. We're truly a professional organization with a unique perspective. Volunteers are available to talk to you about membership at the MINN table in the marketplace throughout the day. A new and exciting benefit to membership this year will be access to the MINN Global Report for 2014 through 2015. This report will disaggregate Minnesota NGOs by sector, region of the world, staff size, and funding source. It will also have a quick guide to internships and volunteer opportunities. The report's a major enterprise that we're excited to debut to our members. Let me direct you to the print program you received at registration. It's also available as a digital publication online, and you can find the URL address on the inside cover. The digital version is rich with hyperlinks that will connect you with more detailed information about today's presentations and sponsors. On page 4, you'll find all you need to know about the marketplace and the exhibitors. The digital program has links that will bring you right to their websites. You can also find out about the Passport card game, which will conclude with a drawing for $400 worth of prizes during the reception later this afternoon. On the cover of the program, you'll see the platinum, silver, and bronze level sponsors for this year's summit. We simply could not do this alone, and we are deeply grateful for the support from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, Land O'Lakes, the McKnight Foundation, Global Citizens Network, and the American Refugee Committee. Please join me in giving them a special thank you. I would like to take a moment to announce the Ebola Exchange, an initiative being led by the Minnesota Council of Foundations with the Global Funders Network, Medtronic Foundation, and the American Refugee Committee, to discuss the Ebola outbreak impacting West Africa and, increasingly, the rest of the world. The primary objective of this effort is similar to that of the MINN Idea Summit: to provide a forum for the exchange of information and knowledge about what is happening and what can be done to address this crisis. If you would like to learn more about the Ebola exchange, please stop by the American Refugee Committee table in the marketplace or check the MINN website for information on the initiative and how you can get involved. Additionally, this summit would not have been possible without the support, guidance, and collaboration of our Summit Advisory Committee. We would like to recognize and thank John Halverson of Land O'Lakes, Dean Eric Schwartz of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, Mohammed Idris of Araha, Shell Berg of Borton Companies, Secretary of State Mark Ritchie, Susan Cornell Wilkes of Global Horizons for Women, Jane Milan Cady of the McKnight Foundation, and Jeff Dykstra from Partners in Food Solutions. For us at MINN, the Idea Summit is the embodiment of the values for which this organization was formed in 2005. Our mission is to serve you as a convener and connector, to provide a forum for sharing expertise, nurturing collaboration, and offering inspiration. Today, we have 164 organizations represented at the summit. Humanitarians, development experts, funders, educators. Our office addresses may be here, but our work and our passion live around the world. As practitioners, we know the complicated nature of working across borders in every kind of culture, every kind of terrain, and every kind of political environment. And I believe we tend to share some characteristics. We are creative, we are tenacious and nimble, we are adventurous and compassionate, we are bold and we are patient, and we are most certainly diplomatic. We often go where others are afraid to travel. We face fears, and we help quiet fears. We learn by going, and we teach by going. Largely, we gather and share information to make the world a healthier place for all. It is challenging and exhausting work, and it is profoundly rewarding. I imagine you're here today because you have an intense curiosity about the world, and you value continuous learning. You're open to new ideas, and you also have great ones to share. We appreciate so much that you are taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us here today. Your presence makes the summit the quality event that it is. Speaking for all of MINN, we hope you find your time here educational and inspiring. We hope you meet people and organizations that you didn't know before and you reach out to say hello. Today, we are friends and we're celebrating the work that we do. Together, we can do global good better. At this time, I invite Eric Schwartz to take the stage. Eric is Dean of the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs, a platinum sponsor for this year's summit. Eric has served in a variety of senior public service positions with NGOs, the United Nations, the U.S. State Department, and is part of the National Security Council. As Dean of the Humphrey School, he brings a unique global perspective to public service, and we are honored to have him here with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dean Eric Schwartz and thanking the Humphrey School for their great support.
Thank you, Jill. What a pleasure, what a joy to welcome you all here this morning. I want to thank you all for coming on behalf of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. We relished the opportunity to serve as a host and a forum for this event. We take some pride in the fact that of the 300 or so public affairs schools in the United States, our peers rank the Humphrey School number 3 with respect to our training and scholarship in nonprofit management. And that really is a reflection of the ethos and the mission and the commitment here. The idea that governance involves so much more than government. So when the opportunity for this school to host this summit arose, we jumped at the opportunity. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be part of this process. So thank you. And when Hubert Humphrey traveled to Washington and met with the delegation of citizens organizations that had traveled there in 1964 for the March on Washington, it reflected his perspective about the role of social organizations in broad governance. And it is a tradition, it is a mission that we take very seriously here. So I'm going to take the opportunity to try to spark the interests of many of you in a degree at the Humphrey School. We have a booth in the forum, and if you want to come as a mid-career student, or if you want to come as a student who's just getting their professional life started, we're eager to talk to you about that. So thank you again. It is my real pleasure and my honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Jacqueline Novogratz is founder and CEO of the Acumen Fund, a nonprofit global venture capital fund, the goal of which is to use entrepreneurial approaches to address global poverty. Acumen Fund has invested over $50 million of long-term capital in 50 businesses that have impacted more than 40 million people in the past year. Any money that is returned to Acumen Fund is reinvested in enterprises that serve the poor. Prior to Acumen, Jacqueline founded and directed the Philanthropy Workshop and the Next Generation Leadership Program at the Rockefeller Foundation. She currently sits on the advisory boards of Sonnen Capital and the Harvard Business School Social Enterprise Initiative. She serves on the Aspen Institute Board of Trustees and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council for Social Innovation. She has been featured in Foreign Policy's list of top 100 global thinkers and, I guess more importantly, the Daily Beast's 25 smartest people of the decade. So it is my pleasure to introduce Jacqueline Novogratz to you. Jacqueline.
Thanks, Jill. That's lovely. Thank you, Dean Schwartz, and thanks to all of you. Jill, thank you for your leadership in making this happen. And I'm really impressed as well that the MINN Ideas Summit comes about because of so many volunteers. And it's really to you mostly that I also want to thank. I think it's so indicative of where we are in the world, that people are giving of themselves to make change happen, and it's certainly needed. So thank you to all of you who've done that. It's also exciting to listen to Jill's words of the creativity that you each bring, the tenaciousness and the patience, because those are themes that you're going to hear through everything that we do and have learned through Acumen. So just want to say how happy I am to be here with all of you. Jill mentioned Ebola, and it's certainly something that's been on my mind as a New Yorker. Our first case of Ebola transpired yesterday. But more than that, I think it's really indicative of where we are as a world, that objectively, the world has never been safer. We've never had less wars. We've never had less violence. People have never had more rights. And yet, subjectively, the world feels like a very scary place right now. And too often, we see the scariness through only our own lens. We have Ebola in Guinea and Sierra Leone and in Liberia, and our response is close down the borders, close down the airports. And yet, what this conference is really all about is that we are now one world. And we've got to focus on building health infrastructure in those countries. I was in Ghana a week and a half ago, and I got notes from people all over the world, including from Pakistan, saying, get out, it's so dangerous, despite the fact that there were no cases, and still are no cases there. And objectively, it doesn't make sense, but as humans, we don't often always move from that place. Same with ISIS. ISIS is even scarier because it is so emblematic of a sense of humiliation, of marginalization, not again just in Iraq and Syria, but we're seeing recruits coming out of the United States and Europe. So what does it mean for the world in this place of it's the worst of times and it's the best of times, to transpose Dickens? On the best of times front, though, we never have been more connected as a world. We've never had the tools that we have. And something that's been really of great import to me is to see the kind of transformational leaders that are coming forth. Not only a 17-year-old Pashtun girl who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, Malala, but the Pope, who's looking at an institution that many thought would not change. And he's pushing in the most daring way for renewal and re-energization, helping us imagine how these institutions may have to change with the world. And I think that's got to be part of this whole conversation that we have on innovation as well. Who will we be as leaders, and do we dare to transform ourselves as we try to transform the world? That's really what I want to talk about in terms of Acumen, because while Acumen is technically started with a fund, we now invest in leaders as well as companies and the spread of ideas, because at the end of the day, what we are about is finding a better way to tackle problems of poverty. We feel that the new world and the new economy demands that of all of us. My own background started off on Wall Street, and I worked primarily in Latin America during the debt crisis of the early 1980s, and that's really where I saw both the power of markets to enable companies and jobs to be built. We're seeing in China and India certainly people moving out of poverty by the millions and millions. I also saw the limitations of markets and how markets too often exploit or overlook the poor. And on the other side, I went from Wall Street to Rwanda in 1986 and built the first microfinance bank in that country. I saw the power of aid and a philanthropy of government, and I saw the limitations of top-down approaches that too often create dependence. Through the years of working in development, now numbering 30, I saw that in many ways we are not defining poverty in the right ways. We look at it as $1.25 a day or less, and that's a technical definition. But really poverty, and it's connected to ISIS and it's connected to Ebola, poverty is really about a lack of opportunity and choice. It's your inability to solve your own problems in your own way. And so if there's a single driving idea behind Acumen, is that dignity is more important to the spirit than wealth, and that we need to build better systems that allow people to opt in so that they can become the full human beings we all want to and must become. At the center of what we do is this idea of patient capital. And it's why I so appreciated you using that word. It's this idea that our capital systems are great on efficiency. But if we just look at capitalism, the old way of investing in companies that will then make shareholders rich, we're not going to solve the problems that we face as a world together. That we need to find those intrepid entrepreneurs that are looking for long-term social impact, not only short-term financial aid gain, and that we would support them with a lot of management assistance, as well as then measure what we're seeing in terms of the impact on the ground, not only the money that we get back to Acumen, which, as Dean Schwartz said, we reinvest. I don't think I quite understood just what it meant to try to build a business for people who make $1 and $2 a day, but it's hard, as you all know. Two, that these entrepreneurs have to fight not only a massive lack of infrastructure, but completely broken infrastructure. I took this photograph a couple minutes after we had just driven on this beautiful tarmac road, and a flash flood came, and had we been on the wrong side of the road, we may have been there for 3 days. Plans just don't work in the way they should, as you know. I also learned through this work that that it's not just corruption, but you have to fight bureaucracy and you have to fight complacency. That markets for the poor are actually political economies. They're not market economies. Everybody has their hands in those areas where the poor depend on either social services or religious leaders or slumlords or mothers-in-laws who have a lot more control than I ever understood as well. The good news, though, is that patient capital works. That if you can invest in entrepreneurs and go the long haul, now we understand that we marry them. I thought it was 5 to 7 years. It's more like 7 to 12 years. And you can withstand ups and downs. You can actually change entire systems. We've invested actually almost $90 million and have moved over $500 million into those companies to create change. And I thought that what I would do, since you're such a sophisticated group of innovators yourselves, that I would actually just look at 5 lessons that we've learned using some of the examples that we've built over the last 13 years now to start the conversation that you're having. This is actually a quote by Gandhi. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then hopefully you win. And I think that I didn't understand, again, that quote as well viscerally as I did intellectually when I first heard it. We now see this in almost all of our companies. They go through this same transition if they're going to get to scale. And probably the best example that we have of this, ironically, is in ambulances. In India, not unlike the United States until the 1960s, until about 6 years ago, 90% of people in ambulances were dead. You call an ambulance to take your loved one to the morgue, you take a taxi if you want to go to the hospital. It was an entirely broken, corrupt, and bloated system, primarily driven by government that would hire private contractors. The private system was just as corrupt and just as ineffective, but at least some wealthy people could bribe someone to get them to hospital if they needed. And enter into this scene in a country of 1 billion people, Shafi Mathur on your left, who's like a bull in a china shop and exactly the right kind of guy to start a disruptive innovation like ambulances at that particular time, now 7 years ago. And now the CEO, Shweta Mangal, who's just the right person to scale an institution once you've had that disruption. They came to Acumen with 9 ambulances and this great ambition that they were going to change the system. We were as crazy as they were and bought 30% of their company and thought, let's just try, even though Mumbai alone is a city of 17 million people, which at the time had 70 working ambulances, none of which had standard equipment that would be anything like you'd find in the United States. When I talk about fighting corruption, you fight it at all levels. The first thing was trying to get a number, not like 911, 311, 111. They wouldn't pay bribes. They got 1298. That's a really hard number to remember. And when you are flipping out, trying to call and trying to recall that number, what happened is people go into lizard brain. And so they would look for the 12 at the end of the phone. And so we had to do a whole marketing campaign, more philanthropy, just to get people to learn to say the number 1298 so that they would dial it correctly. That's even before you start to create awareness that there might be an ambulance company that would show up. With the terrorist attacks in 2010, however, the fact that these were the only ambulances that showed up and were on footage in front of every one of the burning hospitals changed the whole game. And just like in the United States during the Cold War, when Truman and Eisenhower saw that we had no emergency response system in the United States, and that's when ambulances started going public, it was those attacks that then started moving government to take this company from a pure private play that we had invested in to a private-public partnership. So it could be not just an innovation, but could actually scale as a partnership. And so in some of the states, you see 108 now, which is an easier number to remember. It's a fully free service for low-income people, and now about 76% of all people who take this service make under $2 a day. So we have seen it. I thought it would be interesting to you, particularly those who are on the financial side, just to see what it actually takes. We've invested about $2.6 million over time. And this first one in this Validate, what we would call our Validate state, of organizational development is really backed fully by philanthropy, where you just have very little chance of succeeding, but if you do, you can succeed big. As these companies grow, however, more traditional investors can come in and help build them. Today, Zakitsa, which is the new name of the company, serves a catchment area of 200 million people across India. It is the model for delivering emergency services, both to the wealthy and to the poor, which has always been the ethos of this company. It has taught us that while private sector resources and innovation can make change, usually you need the public sector to scale change, particularly if you want to do it in an inclusive way. And that's really the promise of innovation using a patient capital approach. My second big lesson for the day for us is build it and they will come as a big fat lie, particularly when it comes to markets for the poor. And in this moment where innovation is so the rage, when we will talk to people about technologies and innovations for low-income farmers that make all kind of conventional sense, like drip irrigation, which will double productivity within 2 harvests, people say, well, why isn't it going viral? But that's just not the way change happens. Not when you are trying to make it every single day, as you all know. And probably the best example is solar light. In the same year, 2006, that the ambulance company came to us, these 2 young men were graduating from Stanford Business School. Sam Goldman on your left and Ned Tozam on your right had developed a $30 solar light. And it made all conventional sense that you would have something that was cheaper, cleaner, obviously less expensive on a net basis if you looked over a 3-month period, less dangerous than kerosene. But that didn't really matter to the people who they were trying to sell to, the $1, $2, $3 a day people who were dependent on kerosene. Because with kerosene, you can pay every single day for tiny bits of kerosene to give you light. And so they didn't care if they could look at an amortization over a 3-month period. They only cared about the cash that was in their pocket. 2, there was no trust. They'd seen so many of these great technologies come and go over so many years that they were not going to trust a light that was going to cost them a lot of money that may or may not work in 3 months, whereas the kerosene was something they knew. So it took an enormous amount of energy, resources, marketing to get people to convert to solar. What we also didn't understand is that once they did convert, they would immediately want to go up market and move from just a little solar light to a fan and a more beautiful system. And then the third thing we didn't understand is that people would prioritize cell phone chargers over the light itself. So if you want to get solar so that we can eradicate kerosene, which isn't good for anyone, make sure you get a cell phone charger on it. They've been working on iterating on the light, and this is the cheapest model, and they now have a suite of 6 products that go from an $8 price point to a $60 price point. They've also done a joint venture using mobile money so that now, if you've got a mobile money on your phone, you can pay just like you pay for kerosene. A couple shillings on Monday, none on Tuesday, whatever you earn on Wednesday, just so that you've paid your monthly installment. With a big system like this one, which is a new company, they can actually turn your cell phone, your unit off through the telephone, and Google Maps now allows them to track your unit so that if you don't pay, they can find you and they can find it. So while you're starting to see markets development, you're seeing enormous side-by-side innovation that is also happening on the technology field that is allowing new marriages for even more change. D-Light today has brought safe, affordable solar light to more than 40 million individuals who pay for it themselves, who make the decisions themselves. It's a profitable company, and yet to get the company here took a lot of philanthropy, a lot of talent, and a lot of side-by-side support. So again, it's not just an easy story of let the markets rule. The markets don't. We need a mix of markets and smart philanthropy for innovation. with apologies for the whole theme of today's conference on innovation, I thought it was important to also just put in the word of caution that sometimes we overrate innovation. And we're always looking for the new. We're always looking for the cool. And if I've learned another big lesson, the engineer that comes in with the water filter that's going to change the world, but doesn't know anything about how markets work, don't know anything about how poor people make decisions, it's not necessarily that helpful. And this is an example that is up in northern Uganda, Gulu. For all of those of you who know Joseph Kony, the warlord who was in civil war in northern Uganda for over 20 years, meant the moving of 1.4 million people into IDP camps. They look like this. They literally lived there for more than 20 years. So an entire generation and a half grew up in these camps. When they came back to Gulu, they literally had no skills, no money, no trust, no tools, and you have to build a new economy. NGOs and missionaries came in for about 2 years and then started to move out. So Bruce Robertson came in with an innovation from 1792, Eli Whitney's cotton gin, and started buying cotton from the farmers. Of course, he needed side-by-side support so that he could train them, get them implements, really start literally from ground zero. And today, that company, we have invested about $5 million with that company, works with 50,000 farmers across Gulu. And if there's ever a place that I've been to where I've seen physical rebirth, it is this place. Some of these cotton gins, you mentioned 1964 and Martin Luther King. Some of these cotton gins have been around since 1964, and some are new cotton gins that aren't actually that much more productive. But they, I hope, are going to have a chance to regain Uganda's supremacy as one of the world's great cotton producers. Again, we need to focus on practical wisdom, not just innovation, when we look at in whom we will invest and the ways we think about serving people. Fourth is, if failure is not an option, neither is success. Many of our companies, as they build in this long road, they have to make some really back-breakingly difficult decisions, which includes closing the whole thing down or closing pieces of it down. One of the most difficult for us was with a maternal health care company. It's named LifeSpring, and its mission is to provide affordable maternal care, not to the poorest of the poor women, but to that next bracket, making between $1 and $3 a day. In India, which has the worst maternal health record in the world. And what happened here had nothing to do with the innovation, nothing to do with not understanding who the customers were, which is kind of not true. When we first started, we thought the customers were the women that were having the babies, and we learned very quickly that the mother-in-laws make all the decisions. So if you are not talking to the mother-in-laws, you are not talking to the real decision makers, and so that was a big lesson there. But what happened was, with co-investors and a lot of pressure externally, there was a push for this company to grow way too fast. We've got a need, move it out, help more women, before we really understood unit profitability. So the company grew to 12, and as a nonprofit that's focused on the poor, shutting down 3 maternal health hospitals for poor women is not a fun decision to have to make. And yet, kudos to the team, to the board, to the CEO. We did, and now the company is back up to 12 and is on a growth trajectory to become the largest low-cost, high-quality maternal health care company in India, and hopefully will be a real model for the world. And then finally, just this continuation of seeing potential where others see despair. This is where the opportunities so often are, as you know. One of my favorite new investments that we've made that really does speak to innovation is a company called Sanergy in the Nairobi slums. This is a slum made famous for what's known as the flying toilet. Because sanitation is so horrendous, people tend to defecate in their homes on paper or plastic, and throw it onto the roofs or into the paths. And so this company was trying to both focus on what traditionally is done, which is latrines, but recognizing that latrines that fill over aren't really useful to anyone. So you had to somehow get the waste out of the slums. And so what they've done is created a franchise model where they sell these latrines to individual women, and now there are about 160 of them in this one particular slum. They repay over an 18-month period by charging every day. The toilets are incredibly clean. They do not smell because there are 2 holes in the toilet to separate waste, and the dry and liquid waste are collected on a daily basis. No one knew whether young men would actually sign up to do this job, but they have signed up. There are about 300 of them. They make a significant amount of money compared to their neighbors, and the waste is then converted into an organic fertilizer. So there's a lot of risk in our investment still because we haven't proven that you can commercialize human organic fertilizer in Kenya, either to smallholders or to the large corporates. But we're starting to see some evidence that you can. If they are successful in doing this, it will be a game changer for sanitation because it is providing real dignity, beauty, and a lovely experience. 3 million people who live in the slums, and it is providing activity enhancers to smallholder farmers in a way that does take waste and turn it into riches. But as we continue to learn, keep your seatbelts on for the next 7 years, and we'll find it. But if we do, 7 years is not a long time. And it really brings me to my last point, that at the end of the day, we want solutions too often in little boxes when we keep learning over and over that the solution lies in each and every one of us. For these companies to make change, yes, it is usually a social entrepreneur that is already comfortable seeing themselves in the private sector and in the nonprofit sector. But it is arrogant to think that it's only an NGO that really understands the poor, or only the private sector that can get things done, or only government that can scale. We need the corporations, we need the nonprofits, we need the private sector social entrepreneurs. We need students doing research and the universities that enable us to really prove what works and what doesn't work. Mostly we need the honesty and the courage to talk about our successes, our failures, what we're learning, whether we're really impacting low-income people. The stakes are really high because as Ebola and ISIS show us, the stakes come back to all of us. I am reminded of this all the time, and not so much, even more so when I was in Ghana 10 days ago, when we have a new company there that is not Sanergy. It's a different kind of toilet model. We have a lot of different toilet models, and I have ruined many a dinner party getting really excited. Our toilet models, but this one is imperfect. It's really early stage. It's totally pioneering. And so I wanted to see the whole supply cycle of how sanitation works in Ghana. And so it's in a slum of Kumasi in the middle of Ghana. And first we went to the public toilet. And there are about 400 toilet people in this area total. And so as we started walking toward this toilet, you could smell it in a quite extraordinary and graphic way. And as we saw the toilet itself, it really looked rather foreboding. The people that were sitting outside the toilet didn't want us to go in, and when they finally acquiesced, it was only on grounds that only the women went in, not the men with whom I was walking, and that no cameras were allowed. And so, and this is the public pay toilet where people pay every single day as much as they pay for Sanergy. And walked in, the stench was truly so bad that I thought I was going to throw up, and never got myself actually into the stall because it was so full of feces. Of course, I was wearing these little sandals, and there's cholera all over. They're having a cholera crisis right now in Ghana. So I was really, hating my dress wear as well. But I kept thinking, I kept literally feeling like color was coming through my feet and that my skin was being permeated with disease in a way that I'm not a skittish person. And I was trying to imagine what it would feel like to go to that place every single day. And then just by happenstance, the first customer we went to go visit was Abdul. And I said, how long have you lived in this slum? And 74 years. And it just hit me that for 74 years, this man has gone there. And now he has his own toilet. And it's about 3 months old. And I said to him, so Abdul, talk about your toilet, and I want you to tell me what dignity is for you. And he said, well, because public toilet, even though we pay every day, they make me a beggar, because I stand in line with my pay, but I'm not a customer, because I have to wait a really long time. And when I'm inside, I'm really afraid the whole time that I'm so many of the times I can't even ease myself. And then I go home and I feel shame and I take a shower. What's just happened isn't good for my health. And now I can go when I want to go. I can put my toilet clean. And by the way, I lock my toilet so that other people will not abuse it. And I feel really proud for that. And I felt this combination of being humbled by him. I felt rage that this is a multi-million-dollar operation, these public toilets, and we can do better than that. And I felt that I felt a deep sense of injustice that this man has had to wait 74 years before he can ease himself in his language in a way that just has a little bit of dignity and respect. That is our opportunity as a world today, that we have billions of individuals on this planet who are willing to pay, who want to solve their own problems. And it is not that difficult to find the innovation to do so. The difficulty and the longevity that's required is to fight these battles against bureaucracy, complacency, corruption, and our own desire for the easy. And if there's ever been a time to embrace the difficult, it's now. Because we do have all the tools, and we do now know, and we can see each other. And in so doing, I think the real understanding that I have developed is that we find dignity not just for the people who we believe have been left out, and they have the opportunity to transform ourselves and to find dignity for ourselves in ways that allows us the most sparkle, the most shine, ultimately the most joy. Martin Luther King says that love without power is anemic and sentimental, and that power without love is reckless and abusive. And I feel that the opportunity that we have is to walk with the courage and the sense of justice that really marries love and power. And so I wish you a wonderful day of thinking about innovation yourselves within the context of this world and the opportunity we really have to do incredible things together. So thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna. Thank you. Thank you.
That was terrific and so inspiring.
Thank you.
You need to prompt me when we have to finish. Or if you want to give me a time, I'll take it right now, but maybe you'll just prompt me. I want really this session to give folks in the audience the opportunity. I beg your pardon? Your mic pack is off. Oh, okay, sorry. I want to use this session to give folks in the audience the opportunity to ask questions. But I've been told I should ask the first one, so I will. And you know, you speak about scale, and so my question, and I guess having spent half of my career in government, my question is, what of the role of government, both traditional donor governments, the international public international organizations, what are the responsibilities of governments here in terms of creating an enabling environment to achieve the results that you're talking about, especially if the issue is scale?
So I think that we're at a point in history where we have so much population, things are moving so quickly that the conversation around this is government's responsibility and this is the private sector's responsibility in some ways isn't as useful as what do we see as a good society? Going back in a funny way to Aristotle's time, what is a good society? Can we all agree that we want our society, whether it's the United States or Kenya, to make sure that every child has a good education, to make sure that every one of us gets health care, and if there's an emergency, we are taken care of? And if the answer to both is yes, and I believe it is, then can, as you said, which I think is so important, what is government's enabling role to make that happen? And I think that that's a more interesting conversation than what I often find with donors. I'll talk about Pakistan, and we need to help create a model for education, and they'll say, well, it's government's job, and until government decides to do it, we're not interested. And I say, well, that's all good and well, but 40% of kids go to ghost schools where nobody shows up. So maybe if we can find a model that government can then help us move forward in a way that is effective, we will be solving a problem. So I hesitate to say that this is government's job and that is the private sector's job, but rather government's first and foremost job is to make sure that we don't have corruption, that you can actually do business, that we have enough taxation so that we can create the infrastructure, that we can create fairness, and that there's a real safety net for the people that fall out, which we are not doing a very good job of in the United States right now. I would say that those three are your first three basic functions. But beyond that, I think I'd love to see governments engage in more fulsome conversations and discussion around how to enable, like you said, systems to work so that private sector and public sector can get us to better outcomes than we're seeing.
Thank you. Well, since I don't have any questions, I'll keep asking them, if that's all right.
Well, I think people are handing pieces
okay,
of paper.
Good. How, what can, in terms of the current Ebola crisis, what can the principles, the initiatives that you're talking about here, how might they apply in the context of that kind of a crisis, but more generally, since so much of the causes of disenfranchisement are related to circumstances of conflict and humanitarian need, rather than situations of a greater degree of stability. How do the principles that you've talked about apply in a context of conflict and, say, humanitarian suffering, if you know what I mean?
Well, so I would say there are two answers. One is an emergency. And so in the short term, I would say it's very hard to build a long-term business just tautologically. And I think that, Doctors Without Borders, the International Medical Corps, they are the true heroes of what's happening right now with Ebola. And if I had any extra money to donate, I would donate to those organizations as a way of just dealing with the crisis in a humanitarian, suffering-focused way. At the same time, it is possible to get a lot done in high-conflict areas. And in fact, we have been very successful in Pakistan, despite many of the conflicts that continue to go on. We've invested in a agricultural microfinance bank in Bawalpur, which is in the center of Madras extremism. And what we found is if you build an institution that people trust, you can get to robustness very quickly. The farmers themselves, about 300,000 of them, have now deposited more than $20 million into this bank. No one thought that these farmers had any money because it was all put in the mattresses. Right. It is soon going to raise questions, going back to Gandhi, in terms of the status quo. It's a very feudal, very poor area. But when I look at these kinds of innovations and these kinds of institutions that are being built, it gives me great hope that you can go under the radar, even in conflict areas. And I would dare say that sometimes, especially in conflict areas, because there's so much chaos and government is so dysfunctional above that the social entrepreneurs are really the ones that get stuff done.
Yeah.
So I think it's a two-part answer, that there are moments when we need emergency relief. And then long-term, we can still build institutions that matter in the most difficult of areas.
Right. That the presence of conflict doesn't make those areas no-go areas.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
No.
Question from the audience, from the group. How do you fight corruption in public-private partnerships in sectors where public corruption has been problematic, like ambulances in India?
It's really hard, like all of this. And, I think it's always important when we talk about corruption also from a place of humility, is to remind ourselves that governments aren't corrupt, individuals are corrupt. And the corrupt systems can really provide incentives for corrupt behavior. But I've also seen real heroes within incredibly corrupt systems who refuse to play that game. Shafi Mathur and Sweta Mangal, the entrepreneurs at Zakitsa, are two of them. The other thing to remember is that often it's the big Western corporations that help provide a lot of fodder for corrupt systems. And we've got to change that as well. In terms of ambulances, on the little levels like this one where you see petty corruption and you've got one dweeby guy on the end of the phone that won't give you a number, sometimes you just decide to take the bad number, but you tell the story. As it grows, we've gotten a lot more sophisticated. In countries like India, going back to the political economy, a lot of the workers are beholden to political elites, and those political elites can throw strikes very easily, even if the company has done nothing. We've learned to not get all flipped out about a strike happening within a particular company, but have gotten much smarter about how to get through the strike and use the media as well. Media sabotage is another form of corruption, and we've also had that experience. So to have a really good PR firm that can do counter media when you're getting attacked. The biggest, of course, is speed money, extortion, bribes, where there are easy things that can be done. So in many of when you look at public-private partnership, often if I have a state and I need to give you, the sub-minister, my invoice on the 20th of the month so that you will pay me my $10,000 on the 2nd of the month so I can pay my people by the 4th of the month, but you won't pay me until I bribe you. we could start looking at alternative systems whereby we can bridge you so that you don't pay that person, and we make it easier in solidarity to enable that to happen. Finally, and painfully, we're in court right now in one country, and in another country where we found 2 sets of books, we exited a discount. It makes us look stupid as investors, and yet it sends a very strong message that neither will we brook corruption, nor will we just walk away. Because if we just walk away, we've now given you an incentive to show us that you're corrupt. So I think it's walking with a strong moral compass, but not being afraid to use a hammer, and also getting more savvy on media in ways that I think has been a real learning for us.
So you've just addressed a whole range of, I think, really important and interesting kind of tactical considerations in the work that you're doing. So here's a sort of a step back question in light of those comments. How important is a broader strategic focus for Acumen? And can you invest in multiple areas and sectors successfully, and how?
It's another great question. So we started focused just on healthcare just in East Africa and India, and within over 10 years expanded from India and East Africa to Pakistan as well. And in the last 4 years have extended to West Africa, Latin America, and are now exploring the United States. We've moved from one sector, healthcare, to 6 sectors: health, water, education, agriculture, housing, and energy. And as each sector grows, we've learned a lot about which sectors need to be much more government-driven, water and healthcare, which sectors can move more from and education, move more from the market itself, energy and housing and agriculture. And that has also then enabled us to start looking at creating strategies around individual sectors, so that you bring in expertise and you bring in networks to enable you to really move within those sectors. Because our real leverage is in the world of ideas. That even if you build an ambulance company that can reach 200 million people, we've got 3 billion people around the world who have no access. And so it will depend on others to take these lessons and to start moving them.
So we have, I think, 19 Fortune 500 companies here in the Twin Cities. Per capita, the only state that has more is Connecticut, and they're kind of small. I got that line from Amy Klobuchar, so I'm sure many of you have heard that because she's everywhere here. And they're all, most if not all, care a great deal about not only corporate philanthropy, but their role in the world. And so my question would be, if there were 2 or 3 or 4 or 1 lesson you wanted to impart to them, how generally the corporate community should be thinking a little differently, what would those be? And then kind of a connected question is, what are the mechanisms for kind of a collective learning in this area within the corporate community?
Those are great questions. I would say let me start by saying I feel very optimistic about the corporations and certainly their intentions to get involved in this area. I've not met a corporation in the last 3 years that would say that their CSR is exactly what they want it to be. There's a real recognition that we must change corporate social responsibility because it is perceived of as a PR term too often by the external world and too often by their own teams. And when I talk to even Fortune 50 CEOs, they will say that game over in terms of hiring people just because they want to make money. Their employees want to work at places that are sustainable and doing good things for the world as citizens. So there's a huge opportunity for a whole new conversation. The transition is not an easy transition, however, because the lessons I would say, one is, while many of our CEOs are only in their positions, unfortunately, for 5 years, they are now they have to be driven to short-term results just as they are driven to quarterly financial results. So when we come and say, it takes us 10 years to really build something from beginning to scale, they say, we love what you're doing, but could you do it a little faster? And so I think we've got to find corporate partners who realize that we need their skill set. And when we have worked with Unilever and Dow on technical assistance, they can help build supply chains in ways that, with all respect to the many, many students that want to work with us, they've just not had that experience. So D-Light's move to 40 million has been helped by Dow, who's brought in really senior people who know how to build out a supply chain. We need more of that. But in addition to that, we need philanthropic funds that were traditionally put in CSR to help not only build the companies, build the talent, and what we see are companies that come to us, and it is so exciting. And they want to build companies along their supply chain that are sustainable, that treat the workers well, that they feel proud of. And boy, do I want to be that partner. What we need, though, is a recognition that it's not just investment capital that's needed. You need, for as much investment capital as you need side-by-side philanthropic money that is smart, that isn't go hire a consultant, that actually builds the company. You need a different set of metrics around what success looks like, and then you need the technical assistance from senior people to actually build and scale these companies. I believe if we could create that model for the world, the employees will love it, the smallholders will have real opportunity to get rid of middlemen, and the consumers will feel really proud of the kind of companies they are able to interact with.
This theme of harvesting this knowledge is a really important one, but I've got other questions. And I think I've been told I can ask. I can offer two or three more. So here's one: how can we advocate grassroots realities to funders, grant donors to invest in relevant, innovative programs, especially in third world countries?
I think that an underrated skill is storytelling. And we actually have courses online now at Acumen. And one of the most popular ones is our storytelling course. This idea of the moral imagination and putting yourself in another person's shoes and then building from that perspective. I often, grassroots activists, and I was one and sometimes still am one, often we let the frustration and rage that we feel fuel our stories. And so we either tell our stories in a way that is full of judgment for the people that we're trying to raise money from, and that's not a very good storytelling approach. Because everybody can feel the truth. So how do we actually have that moral imagination that goes both ways and have respect? That at the end of the day, everybody wants to do good, and we have to find the ways to enable that. The other piece, though, I think is connected to that, is to really move away from, let me tell you all the terrible things that are happening, to let me show you what's possible. Let me show you what the world could look like if we did this together. And you're starting to see that from the classic, poor Sally Struthers gets a really bad rap because she did a lot of good things for the world. But we always say, well, the Sally Struthers, the kids with flies on their face. I still hear a lot of that. Look at this poor woman, this is what's happened, rather than really showing our shared humanity.
Yeah. How do you identify the leaders who will become the social entrepreneurs and bring about change? Interesting assumptions around this question.
It is a lot of interesting assumptions, and it's particularly interesting to me because we have multiple fellows programs at Acumen as well. We have a global fellows program for which we get about 1,100 applications for 10 to 12 spots. So it's really easy for a young person who gets one of those leadership opportunities to say, oh, so I'm already a leader. And we say, no, you're on the leadership journey. And there's a real nuance. We now have leadership programs as well in Pakistan, India, and East Africa. We look for individuals with resilience, persistence, grit, as well as kindness, a strong moral compass, an insatiable curiosity, a willingness to talk about their own failures, because where we see our social entrepreneurs fail most of all is when they are not self-aware enough to understand that nobody changes the world alone. And the social enterprise innovation space too often puts the social entrepreneur on a pedestal. And as soon as we think they're going to be successful, we put them on the conference circuit, and we're so excited by all the stories that they tell, but we don't look at what they're building. My CEO, Carlisle Singer, here came from Minneapolis, so you should feel really proud because I love your city as a result. You know, she brought with her 30 years of private sector experience as a CEO and a COO of a $300 million company. And we would not ever have a chance of scaling without her and that skill set. But she's not on the stage. And so we need to find those entrepreneurs who recognize their strengths, but also recognize their own weaknesses. And I think that that is a really underrated character trait of the leaders that we need in our world.
Your response, I'm going to take the liberty of saying this is an extension of the last questions, because I like that. We'll just, redefine. But your response really kind of raises, in my mind, a very interesting question. Over the last 2 decades, if there's one consistent theme in the work of organizations, international organizations that are involved in international development work and international humanitarian work, it's the notion, it's defining accountability in large measure in terms of developing local capacity, but also respecting local processes. So much so that when we were doing an evaluation of the tsunami response, the international NGOs wrote a report, and they concluded by saying, they didn't say local organizations should drive the recovery process. They didn't say that. What they said was local organizations drive the recovery process as a statement of fact, and international organizations have to come to grips with the fact that these are locally driven processes. So how do you balance that ethos with the fact that you're coming in with expertise and saying, look, this is what we bring to bear. This is what we have to offer. This is what should be done, versus this other ethic of, respecting local capacity, local processes.
I would say that we need more nuance in all of these conversations. And the real test of leadership is saying hard things and getting people to do hard things. And we don't see enough of that in our world today. We see people taking the easy way out of saying, well, they know, it's their community. And it's like, well, it's really hard to know if you've never seen what is possible. And we hire all local teams. But one flaw that we made a number of years ago is one of our local teams didn't want to make an investment in a not invented here, which happened to be D-Light. And it's like, well, it happened to be invented in Stanford by a kid who'd lived for 5 years in Benin. He actually knows a little bit about what it means to live in a village. You've frankly never lived in a village. And, but this is ego and hubris. This is not the reality of a possibility that we should bet on from wherever it comes from. Right. For it to work, it's got to be something that is deeply valued by the people who will use it and will ultimately buy it. That's the real test. And so I feel that, and it even goes back to your very first question, Dean Schwartz, around the role of government, the role of, I was in one of the most frustrating conversations, and I promise I won't end on a downer, but one of those
Please don't.
frustrating conversations of the last year was with a government official where we were asking for money to make the kinds of investments Acumen makes. And the person on the other end of the conversation wanted to tell me in person, because we're so values aligned and mission aligned, as to why the answer was no. And she said, you know, I don't know how to say this, so I'll just say it like it is, which is our investment committee is worried that with Acumen, and specifically with you, Jacqueline, on the investment committee, when things get really difficult, you are going to make decisions on behalf of the poor rather than your shareholders. And I really think that this is government money, which from the last I heard is actually supposed to be there for the poor. And two, that can you not, after all of what I've just told you, can you not hold the nuance that we can make decisions based on what the poor need so that they can make their own decisions? Because yes, you're damn right, we're going to stand for the poor and make decisions. And if we cannot build a profitable, sustainable company that serves them for the long term, that's not standing for the poor. And can't we live within that nuance and say, here is where the market falls short, so let's find a solution? And it's only when we find that kind of leadership that's willing to stand, literally stand up, but hold nuance, hold opposites, that we will actually be able to navigate this incredibly complex world in which we are walking. And when it works, you see it work. D-Light is a profitable company that is now taking on very significant amounts of traditional capital, but it didn't start out that way. And it didn't come from Africa, it came out of Palo Alto. But the last visit I made to a customer was a woman named Teresia in a little hut in Kenya. And I was with this big white-haired Australian guy who is the regional distributor. And the old way was she would say how happy she was and we would feel good about ourselves. But this time I said to Teresia, I want you to tell David Small, Mr. Small, what you like about the light and what you don't like about the light. And she told him what she liked about the light. And then she said, it would be really helpful if I could charge my phone at the same time as I charge my light. And he said, thank you very much. And then she was like, and second, and then she gave him 4 different suggestions as to how he could improve his light. And I watched this tiny woman looking up at this enormous hulking man who could intimidate anybody. And I watched her not pander, not beg, but treat him like an equal who demanded her attention and respect. And I watched him stand there, not with this false sense of superiority or the arrogance and certainty of being the donor who knows everything, even though it's his first time in Kenya. I saw him standing there, curious to learn and to see her as a customer whose respect and trust he needed to cultivate and maintain. And it is in that interaction that they have the opportunity to transform themselves and each other. And that is why I started Acumen, and that is what dignity is to me, and that is the chance that we have if we're willing to go into that uncomfortable place of the kind of leadership we so desperately crave from others, but since we're not seeing enough of it, have to start move from in ourselves.
Well, you know, you could probably be accused of a lot of things, but ending the session on a downer would not be one of them. So please join me in thanking Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
That was just terrific.
Thank you.